Do you know that the smallest country in the world is an absolute monarchy led by the Pope? Yes, it's the Vatican. This small state, covering 44 hectares, about twice the size of Paris's Champ de Mars, is enclaved in the heart of Rome, Italy's capital. So yes, it's small, and we can even find that. It's curious to see that there is such a small independent state recognized internationally. What's even more curious is that this state is less than a century old. But then, where does it come from? And then after all, why does the Pope, who is the head of the Catholic Church, have his own country? What legitimacy did he have to claim to lead an independent state? I'll explain this to you shortly. The Vatican's origin dates to the 8th century, when Stephen II, the Bishop of Rome, reached an agreement with the Frankish king. Pepin the Short seeks to acquire a territory to rule over. This was not obvious, as the Pope, the Bishop of Rome and symbolic religious father, depended on the authority at the time of the Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, whose capital was Constantinople, now called Istanbul. This Bishop of Rome did not have temporal power over the city or its region, apart from a few properties belonging to the church. The theoretical political power relied on the Exarch of Ravenna, essentially a Byzantine Empire governor. Although the situation was in practice much more blurred due to the rise in power of the Lombards, who were a Germanic people who settled in Italy in the 6th century. The Lombards will cause great fear to Pope Stephen II, who first seeks help from the Byzantine emperor but finds no protection, thus pushing the Bishop of Rome to turn to the strong man of the moment in the West, Pepin, king of the Franks, who agrees to support the Pope. After failed negotiations with the Lombards, the Franks forcefully attributed the former Exarchate of Ravenna to the Bishop of Rome. That is to say, a whole part of central Italy, as you can see on the screen. This is done through what is called the Treaty of Kiersey to the donations of Pepin. This donation was subsequently legitimized through a fake document called the Donation of Constantine. The document suggests that the Roman Emperor Constantine, who ruled in the 4th century Anno Domini, granted the Pope of that time numerous rights, such as the precedence of the Bishop of Rome over all other bishops. So, in essence, the Bishop of Rome was supposed to be the head of Christianity, which was not the case in reality. As well as properties, including the ownership of the city of Rome of Italy. This is a classic case of the empire's western provinces being affected. The bigger the case, the more widespread the impact, since they clearly didn't go there reluctantly. Nevertheless, this marks the first time the Bishop of Rome, formerly just a religious leader, essentially becomes a medieval lord, who is then going to have to defend his territory, henceforth known as, at least in the Treaty of Kiersey, Republic of the Holy Church of God, which was therefore not a republic, as we understand it today. You will have understood a territory that we subsequently call the State of the Church, or Pontifical State. However, this major event will have other consequences, which will simply and purely change the course of history and justify the existence of the Vatican today. This treaty has the consequence of naturally and gradually tipping the Bishop of Rome from the eastern political and cultural sphere of the Byzantine Empire to the western political and cultural sphere. Unable to rely on Byzantine support, successive bishops of Rome increasingly turned to the Franks under Pepin and his successors for aid. In parallel, this movement means that they gradually gain in influence until they have real spiritual authority, as well as a significant political influence over a good part of Western Europe. Over the next few centuries, this causes numerous political and religious conflicts between the bishops of Rome and Constantinople, leading to a gradual separation of the Christian Church into two. The Eastern Church, now called the Orthodox Church, and the Catholic Church in the West, led by the Pope, the Bishop of Rome. The separation is usually placed in the 11th century, although the break, which continued evolving, was not definitive then. Thus, the Bishop of Rome, once a Byzantine subject, has become the de facto independent head of state and spiritual leader of most Western Christians in 3 centuries. Over the following centuries, the Papal State's territory evolved, reaching its peak in the 16th century, controlling a significant portion of central Italy. But this did not happen simply, since the borders of this state, as well as this authority, have been regularly contested by neighboring Italian states and various European powers of the time. Throughout the period from the Middle Ages to the French Revolution, successive popes played a political role, mixing their religious authority with political and personal interests. The Papal States will thus experience a first real existential crisis. In 1798, when Napoleon Bonaparte, at the time general of the very young French Republic, seizes Rome and the Pope's lands in the context of the French Revolutionary Wars, leading to the temporary disappearance of the Papal States. This continued until Napoleon's final defeat in 1815. At this moment, the Congress of Vienna, a complex event in European history where the victorious Allied powers against France reshuffle the cards, takes place. Following the period, it reestablishes the Papal States within a good part of its borders. However, the 19th century was far from peaceful, and the Pope has to face several revolts and revolutions, both against his authority and as part of the Italian Unification movement. Yes, the Papal States are then seen by some of the actors of Italian unification as an obstacle, both geographically and politically. In this shifting and unstable context, worsened by the 1848 revolutions, the Pope's authority over his own territory ends up relying on foreign protection from two rival powers. France and the Austrian Empire place their pawn in the region. However, in 1859, things change. It's that year that the Austrians are defeated by the combined forces of Napoleon III's French Empire and the Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia, who was a particularly proactive Italian state in the Italian Unification movement. The Austrian defeat, combined with the weakness of the Papal armed forces, leads to the rapid disintegration of the Pope's political authority over these lands. By 1861, he only controls Rome and its region, which is solely maintained by the French protection of the Pope. But what happens when Napoleon III is defeated in September 1870 by Prussia, causing the fall of the Second French Empire? Well, the Franco-Prussian War leads to the departure of the French troops, allowing the troops of the Kingdom of Italy, proclaimed in 1861, to seize Rome from the 20th of September 1870, which becomes from the following month the capital of the kingdom. Consequently, Pope Pius IX, expelled from the Papal Quirinal Palace residence, seeks refuge in the Vatican Palace. The Kingdom of Italy has annexed the Papal States, but this annexation is not recognized. He is essentially a prisoner in his Vatican Palace, confined to his role as the head of the Catholic Church. The tense situation is only resolved in 1929 through the Lateran agreements between Mussolini's fascist Italy and the Holy See. And for clarity, the Holy See refers to the legal entity of the Pope, that is, the role of the Pope and his administration. In these agreements, the Holy See recognizes unified Italy, including the annexed pontifical territories. In return, Italy recognizes and guarantees the Holy See's independence within the 44 hectares of the Vatican where the Pope has complete authority. And so it is that the Pope is still today the sovereign of a small independent state in the heart of Rome, the Vatican. Now that you know why the Vatican exists, did you know that there is another enclaved yet independent state in Italy? Well, you'll find the next video interesting.